The world is coming to an end. We only have 10 years before climate change kills us all. Does that sound familiar? Well, it should, because people have been saying it for like 50 years. So, we're going to be talking about the failed climate doomsday predictions on this segment of Stopping Socialism TV. Justin, I guess I should start off by saying that if you want to see more content like this, you have to help us out. You've got to share this. You've got to like these videos. You have to subscribe to Stopping Socialism TV, because Facebook and Google and YouTube, they're not doing us any favors. So if you want to see more of this content to get filtered into your recommended viewing, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Justin, failed climate predictions. Why is this an important thing to address?
I've got one word, maybe it's two words, I don't know, for you. Waterworld. It's an incredible documentary.
Kevin Costner, right?
No, it's a documentary featuring Kevin Costner. It's a real life story about how we're all gonna die from rising seas. And this is where the world is headed. So why should we care about this? We should care about it because if Kevin Costner has taught us anything, it's that we really are headed for a post-apocalyptic climate change hellscape where none of us will survive. And not only Kevin Costner, but Dennis Quaid has also done a really interesting documentary. What is that one called?
Is that The Day After Tomorrow?
Yeah, Day After Tomorrow, which is an incredible movie. You got to watch that one as well. So, yeah, I mean, if Kevin Costner and Dennis Quaid can't convince you of the importance of these issues, then frankly, you're a lost cause.
When did Waterworld come out? I remember seeing that when I was like a kid, and
I'm pretty sure it was the 90s.
I remember everyone saying that it was like one of the worst movies ever made.
Oh yeah,
and I remember like watching it as a kid and thinking like, no, this movie's cool. Like they're like pirates.
1995, and I'm pretty sure that it was like, at least for a while, it was one of the worst in terms of money lost. It was one of the worst at $175 million budget.
Wow,
in 1995.
Yeah, that's humongous.
In 1995, yeah,
1995. They were talking about the world. See if you could find out when that was supposed to be taking place. I know it was made in 1995, but it was like in the distant future of.
That's a great question.
Yeah, I'm
but
curious.
It lost about it made $88 million in the box
so it's
office.
A humongous flop.
A humongous flop. Lost more than $90 million. So terrible.
Yeah.
I will try to look that up.
All right. Well, in the meantime, I'll just kind of mention that this idea of failed climate predictions is something that we actually did research on recently when we were working with Glenn Beck on his latest book, Arguing with Socialists. So what you're seeing here, if you're watching this video on YouTube as opposed to watching the podcast, is like a screenshot from the book where it's got a couple of these like kind of headlines that are put out there. These are throughout the years. Dire famine forecast by 1975. Didn't happen. Great peril to life. Gas pares away Earth's ozone. That didn't happen. U.S. scientist sees new ice age coming. That didn't happen. So it's just like, so, in this segment of the book, they go through a number of these, and usually it's Paul Ehrlich is like the guy that talks about this. He's the one that wrote the book, The Population Bomb, which is this idea that we are going to have too high of a population. It's going to lead to mass starvation and absolute disaster within like 20 years or something. And a number of these predictions throughout the years, they're just predicting absolutely wild stuff. So there's one in here that talks about how like, if we don't do something about pollution, then there's going to be like a killer blue steam cloud of 1989, the year I was born, wiping out everybody. And it's just like a global famine was going to happen in 1975. And again, none of these things happen, but they were all used. All of these doomsday scenarios were all used as justification to push for some type of government action. Today, it's climate change related stuff and changing our reliable energy sources to unreliable ones like wind and solar. Back then, it was for more, I don't know if it was population control type stuff or maybe it was just basic environmental policies. But I mean, Justin, I don't know. How do you want to tackle this? Should we just kind of like read through some of these crazier ones, or what?
Yeah, I think we should. I think we should just go through some of these to give people a sense of what we're talking about. I mean, and how widespread it is. So it would be good if we could touch on a whole bunch of different years and that sort of thing too, because it's been going on for a very, very long time. Before we get into that, really quick, Waterworld update. Water. I'm so glad that this somehow became a thing. The scene is set in the year 2500. 2500.
Okay,
so very far off into the future,
so
which is much more believable.
Yes. So it's not like, it was 2019.
No,
distant future.
Right.
Right. 35 years from
That's
now.
true. That's true. Much more believable. And it made the figure I gave before, it made like $80 something million. That was in US. That was North American box office. Worldwide, it made 264 million. So it actually made money worldwide.
Well, not if you take into account marketing budgets.
No,
probably
that's
broke even.
That's probably true. That's probably true.
Yeah, so I guess that makes sense because I remember like he was evolving like webbed feet or something like that. So that makes sense that it was 500.
Who knows what Al Gore believes, though? Honestly, who knows? Who knows what that guy believes?
He was an associate producer on that movie, wasn't he?
I don't know. He was probably. I don't know. He probably wrote it. To be totally honest.
Yeah, on a weekend. Competitive Enterprise Institute. They composed this. This is about a year ago now. This is a blog post that is wrong again. 50 years of failed eco-apocalyptic predictions. So this goes through and just does like a fantastic job of just relaying all of these doomsday scenarios, just one after another. I think they've got to have like 50 of them here. There's a ton of them, at least a couple dozen. And they've got the screenshots of the newspaper clippings and everything. So yeah, let's go. In 1967, we were being warned about a dire famine by 1975. This is the one I already kind of mentioned. And look, you could see just the quote there. Paul Ehrlich. He's the one touting this stuff. He's going to be a reoccurring guy throughout all of this stuff. He still has a job, by the way. Justin, feel free to just jump in here. We got another one here. This is from 1969. That's the foe of pollution sees lack of time. Quote, the trouble with almost all environmental problems, says Paul Ehrlich, a population biologist, is that by the time we have enough evidence to convince people, you're dead. So, I mean, he was already warning about this in the 60s. We're not dead yet. We must realize that unless we are extremely lucky, everyone will disappear in a cloud of blue steam in 20 years. So that means 1989, by the time I was born, we should have all been blue steam. Didn't happen. It's kind of pretty wild.
Speaking of 1989, Jim Hansen, who
is
now
this
a
another
professor
Waterworld
at Columbia
update?
University. No, it's not. Jim Hansen, now a professor at Columbia University, he predicted that by 2019, so a year ago, the West Side Highway in New York City would be completely underwater because of rising sea levels. In 2008, he also predicted that Earth had reached the, quote, tipping point, and that within a decade, meaning by 2018, the Arctic would be free of sea ice in the summer, which, of course, has not occurred. And even many of the most dire climate alarmists say that might happen within 15 years from now. And that others are predicting that it won't be until 2050 that this could happen. And this was Hansen saying that this would all happen by 2018. Another one that I really like is 1989. Noel Brown, who's a senior environmental official for the United Nations, he predicted that, quote, entire nations could be wiped off the face of the earth by rising sea levels if the global warming trend is not reversed by the year 2000. So that one is, a little behind schedule, I guess. He said that they only had a, quote, this might sound familiar to people, a 10-year window of opportunity, unquote, to fix the coming climate crisis.
Oh, no.
That was, again, 1989 that they had the 10-year opportunity. So that was 21 years ago that the window closed. We were supposedly all going to be wiped off the face of the earth.
It's also amazing. First off, Waterworld update. It looks like there has been talk about doing a sequel to the cult classic.
Of course there has.
So this is probably one of those things that's like, they've talked about like doing a sequel for something forever and it never actually happens.
Right,
but
right.
just know that it's a possibility. I don't know what'll happen first. Waterworld the sequel or any of these predictions coming remotely true. Boston Globe. This is Thursday, April 16th, 1970. Scientists predict a new ice age by the 21st century. So this is another one that you see from time to time. I think there was actually a Time front cover of Time magazine that suggested that we could be facing a threat of a new ice age. So this one kind of falls in the category of like completely opposite of what they're predicting now, which is kind of good to point out. That it's just like, it's not that they just constantly have their timelines wrong. It's just that like their predictions in general are just wildly out, inconsistent with other predictions that are being made by other experts. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I found this one that's pretty interesting. It's from March 2000, the year 2000. It was published in The Independent, which is a big newspaper in the United Kingdom. And it's by Dr. David Viner. At least he's the one quoted in the story. He's a senior research scientist at the Climatic Research Unit of the University of East Anglia. That they are very well renowned for their climate change research. He says that this is from the article. He says that within a few years, meaning within a few years from the year 2000, winter snowfall will become, quote, a very rare and exciting event. Quote, children just aren't going to know what snow is, unquote, he said. That's from March 2000.
Right. The idea of a snowman is just going to be ancient.
It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, so there's the Time magazine one that I already mentioned, talking about how a potential ice age could be, the ozone layer. This is like something, and I'm too young for this, I think, because I remember like this being like a thing in TV shows where they would talk about like the hole in the ozone layer.
Right. Yep.
Like, does that exist? Is that a problem anymore? I never hear anyone talking about that.
I think the problem has been solved.
Oh, good.
I think the ozone.
Did Al Gore take care of that?
I think he did. I think he floated up there in a balloon and filled it himself.
Here's another one.
With his big fat body.
Acid rain. That was another one. Like I have these like faint recollections of like my parents having the news on,
rain.
And they're talking about acid rain like all of the time.
Yes.
You ever hear about acid rain anymore?
No, that was also a big thing. Acid rain's going to kill everybody. Yep. Yeah. Without question.
So then obviously, and we can go through a million of these because there's just so many. Here's the one that threat to islands, that islands are going to be wiped off the map, and there's a lot of starvation ones too. No more snowfall. What's that one that you always bring up when we talk about this, where like the absence of clouds, and there's going to be like the global baking event or something?
Yeah. I'm gonna track that one down. I do love that one. That one's really great.
It's just like it's like Seth Borenstein. He's another one that you'll see consistently talking about this stuff, talking about how we're just a few years away from absolute catastrophe. Al Gore's 10 years predictions. They actually, I should have pulled this up too, but the Inconvenient Truth movie, they made a series of predictions in that, and they had to revise it and change the dates because now the movie is wildly out of date because we are far past.
Did they change the dates? Did they really do that?
I think so. I think when they re-released it or something like that, they changed it.
Wow.
I could be mistaken, but
I know they got a ton of those predictions wrong. And there's all sorts of articles out there about that. Yeah, the one that the cloud one that Donnie was referencing before, that was climate change. This is an article that was in USA Today. This is from a year ago or so. February 2019. I remember because I was at CPAC when this article came out, and I was sitting with Jim Lakely, who's the communications director and now vice president of the Heartland Institute. And we were sitting around waiting for a TV interview or radio interview or something, and this popped up on my phone. And he and I remember talking about it like it was yesterday. It was just so ridiculous. The title of the article from USA Today, Climate Change Could Zap Clouds, Bake the Earth even more. That's what it says. Even more. It's already baking the earth. It could bake the earth even more. And it talks about how it says this is the opening paragraph. The opening paragraph is many of the world's clouds could disappear if the carbon dioxide we keep pumping into our atmosphere soars to extreme levels, a new study suggests. The lack of cooling that would be caused by this is essentially the idea here is that clouds help with cooling. And so if the more heat you have, the less moisture, the fewer clouds. The clouds, it's like a feedback effect. You have fewer clouds, which makes it warming easier, and on it goes. And eventually we have no clouds, and you're just basically living in like a desert wasteland everywhere, all throughout the entire world.
Yeah.
It's insane. It's totally insane.
Waterworld update. So apparently there was essentially a sequel to Waterworld. Didn't come out as a movie, but a series of comic books. So if you want to see the continuation of the Waterworld story, you just have to go to your local comic book shop. So again, we could go through, there's even more of this. I keep thinking that we're at the end, but there's so many of these, predictions of an Arctic-free, ice-free Arctic, right? They were talking about like that one, what's the name of that one mountain that was like, it has a snow peak, and they were talking about how by the year 2015,
Mount Kilimanjaro, I believe,
there's not going to be any ice on the top of it.
Yeah.
That didn't happen,
Yeah.
So again, we could point out all of this, and it kind of just shows that they've been using the same playbook forever, for at least 50 years, talking about if we don't do something, we're all doomed. And I think that this strategy works for only part of the population. And I think that part of the population is the younger population that doesn't have any knowledge that they've been predicting this type of stuff, wildly different predictions for 50 years. None of them ever pan out. They don't know about that. So when they hear AOC or Bernie Sanders or just your typical like Democratic politician talking about how like we're going to all die if we don't do anything about climate change in the next 5 years, they genuinely get worried because they don't know that this has been something that has been talked about for 50 years, or that they've been wrong about for 50 years. And I think like the older audience where they're just like, yeah, I remember that acid rain stuff. Like, yeah, I don't buy this prediction anymore today. Like, I really think that there's like a generational cutoff of like how effective a strategy like this is.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things where I think it depends on how locked in you were during this period of time, obviously. But I do think that there's a certain group of people who remember. I mean, I remember when I was younger, when I was in college, especially as an undergrad, I sort of believed the global warming thing. I mean, I believed that, and I still believe there's global warming, but I mean, sure. I believe that humans were causing global warming and that it could potentially be catastrophic. I didn't think it was an existential threat to human civilization, but I did believe that. And I remember, even though I was very conservative, I was not liberal, but I did believe that was a possibility because that's what the scientists were all telling us. That's what I thought. Didn't really know that much about the issue. And I remember telling my father, who's very conservative at the time, hey, look at all this stuff I'm seeing. Look at all these reports from the United Nations. Look at all this stuff about global warming. Like, we got to do something about this. And I remember my dad just saying, look, I remember the Ice Age scare, and I remember the ozone layer scare, and I remember Y2K and how everyone thought that was going to be the end of the world because of that, and it's just like there's been so many doomsday predictions, especially environmental doomsday predictions, about all kinds of different things. The population control thing was a really, really big deal. People don't, the population boom thing, that was a really big deal in the
Sure.
60s and 70s. People were really concerned that population was just getting wildly out of control and that we were going to be having all these wars over scarce resources because there's too many people being born. And I just think there are a lot of people who can actually remember those things, and it makes it easier for them to be skeptical of these dire forecasts here. But there's someone born every day, right? Yeah. There's a whole new generation of people every day. And if you're telling them, and if everyone in authority is telling them, hey, yeah, we got it wrong before, but forget about that. Like, this is the warmest year on record. We're headed for a catastrophe. And it's the fossil fuel companies, they're evil fossil fuel companies that are causing this nightmare. And it's going to affect you. And I don't even know if you should have kids, because bringing kids into this horrible world is what kind of person are you? I mean, these are the kinds of things that people on the left are saying. And I think that younger generations are always going to be more susceptible to it. And then as they get older and they see the predictions fail, it becomes a little bit easier, I think, to realize, hey, this is probably not something that I need to worry about quite as much as they're making it sound.
There's a very realistic possibility that we are sitting here 25 years from now, and they're talking about like what's going to happen in the next 10 years if we don't do anything, and it's going to lead to global cooling. And we're going to be like these old grouchy guys that are like, I remember back in my day, they were talking about global warming. Like, it's very possible that's going to be the case.
Well,
and there's going to be a whole generation of people that don't remember that.
Exactly.
They're going to be like, what are you talking about? Like, we're all going to freeze to death.
Exactly. And this is why, these doomsday things, I mean, this is why the Greta Thunbergs of the world are so interesting, I think, in a lot of ways, because she really is looking around and she's reading the news and she's reading the studies from the United Nations and she's doing all this stuff. She's saying, everyone's telling us we're headed for disaster. Yeah. And yet all you old people aren't doing anything about it. Like, what the heck is wrong with all of you? Right. Why aren't you saving us from absolute catastrophe? And it's like, maybe because there's a lot of people who remember the last 10 catastrophes that were going to be predicted, and they didn't happen. And nobody wants to blow up the entire world economy and force tens of millions or even billions of people into poverty over the next 100 years because they're worried about something that the scientists, quote unquote, have been getting wrong for many years and have been ignoring all the other scientists who have been saying that it's not going to happen and that actually the world is getting better because of moderate warming. I mean, there's a whole school of scientists high qualified scientists who won awards at NASA and other things that believe that moderate warming is actually, we're better off.
Sure.
That we're better off. And when do you ever hear from those people? You don't hear anything from those people in the mainstream press.
Yeah, we're actually like coming off an era where we're carbon dioxide starved. Yeah, I've heard that.
Right. Yeah, carbon dioxide starved. All these, I mean, and there's so much cherry picking with the data and everything. There was back then, there is now. When they talk about the warmest year on record, almost always that what they mean by that is the warmest year since 1980, which is when they started using satellite to measure temperatures. Like, they're not talking about the warmest year that's ever been recorded ever in human history. They don't even have accurate records for temperatures going back to the 1800s and stuff like that.
We're talking about predictions. We're talking about predictions that are older than that.
Exactly.
That
exactly. And that's the thing, right? So so you are right, I think. Going back to your original question, I think you're right. The older you are, I do think that there's an element of that where you see this so many times. Eventually you say to yourself, you know what? I don't know if I buy this. And really the left is painting themselves into a pretty bad corner because they're the ones that keep making this immediate. Like, we have AOC, right? We have 10 years left to solve this problem, or else we're on an unstoppable track where we're all gonna die. There's actually one on this website where they quote Prince Charles. He's somewhere in here. Our buddy Prince Charles, who's a big advocate of the Great Reset. 96 months to save the world. When was that? What year?
Was in 2009.
2009. So it's over. The world's doomed. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, so why should I ever take you seriously again? Is it over? Is it done? How many times do we have to reach the point of no return? Like, how many times do we have to cross that line before people realize it's always a moving goalpost, because it isn't really about
months. That's so specific.
There was another time, I don't think it's in here, but there was another time where it was even shorter than that. Where he had an even shorter timeline to save the world. It's ludicrous. And that's the thing. It's ridiculous.
96 months divided by 12, 8 years. So add 8 years to this here. That brings us to July of 2016.
Right.
So it's just like, it's basically was trying to set it up for like the 2016 election is like the most important thing in the world. Like, I'm sure that's what
you're probably right.
That's probably why they picked that.
You're probably right.
But yeah, I mean, like, again, and the most important thing, and the thing that like I guess the two most important things that we really want to drive home with this video is A, they've been making these failed predictions for 50 plus years, and none of these things pan out. But two, that these predictions are always used as justification for some global overhaul of the economy or whatever type of climate change action that is being requested at that given time. Like, that's what it's always used for. And then because of how dire the doomsday predictions are, the solutions that are being proposed to counteract that are also like ridiculous. Whether it's the Green New Deal or, if you watched, depending on what order these videos are released, our video on population control. Like, it all stems back to these doomsday prediction scenarios. So
right. And why? And just one last thing: why do they exist? They exist because if you just take a more realistic view of climate change and you say, because there's a huge camp of people, there's a lot of different opinions and views about climate change on the side of, on the so-called skeptic side. There's a very large tent, and there's all sorts of different views within that tent that range from, they don't really think that global warming is even a serious problem that's going to occur in a significant way over the next 50 years, that we may even see a reversal of the trend, that we're not even experiencing significant global warming that's outside of the natural norm that's occurred over many centuries, to, I think human beings are causing global warming. I think global warming is impacting the world, but I don't think that it's an existential crisis. Like, there's a wide range of views within that, and I think they're all acceptable, because I think the science really isn't settled on the issue of just exactly how great the impact is on that human beings are having on the climate and how bad it's going to be for people. But the reason why you have to take the view from the left's perspective, the reason why you have to take the view that we're all going to die, that it's an existential crisis, that whole countries are going to be swallowed up by the oceans, is because anything less than that does not mandate some sort of dramatic alteration of society. And that's the thing. Even if you believe that global warming is a problem and it's being caused by human beings, but that the problem doesn't outweigh the benefits of having affordable energy and fossil fuels and all these jobs and everything else, then you were not going to make that change. You're not going to demand the Green New Deal and stuff like that. And so to have that dramatic impact that the left wants, to have these massive overhauls of society and the economy, it has to be dire. If it's not dire, then no one's going to go along with it. And we know that because they've been trying to get people to go along with it for decades and decades and decades. They've been talking about the end of the world for literally a half century. That's what this whole article is about from CEI. And yet people have not bought into it yet. And so they're continuing to try because they know if they could just get enough people to believe it. Some people do believe it. If they could just get some more people to believe it, if they could just get half the country to believe it, then they have a justification to do all kinds of crazy stuff. And that's really at the heart of everything.
Yeah, and that's kind of why that we were really building out our Stopping Environmental Socialism section on the website stoppingsocialism.com, is because we see that climate change is being used as justification for all of these things, whether it's the Green New Deal, which includes, everything from, overhauling our energy sector to, giving people free college, stuff that has nothing to do with climate change, but we're still using climate change as justification for it. Or, we got Prince Charles up on the screen, stuff that, like even crazier, like the whole Great Reset concept, which if you're not aware, you should really check out the stuff on our website. So that's why we're focusing on these environmental topics a lot lately. You'll see, you'll notice that trend in some of our latest videos, but, if you want to see this stuff, go to stoppingsocialism.com. You can also find pretty much all of our content shared on social media. Stopping Socialism TV is the YouTube page. Make sure to subscribe to that. Also on Facebook, we have a Stopping Socialism page as well as the Stopping Socialism TV page. We also have a Twitter account, we have a Parler account, and we have an Instagram account. Justin, any last words, or tell the fine people where they can find you?
At Justin T. Haskins on Facebook and Socialist Twitter.
Thank you all for tuning in. We will talk to you later.